He was a parasite in a work vest. That's what the lawyer called him. A parasite in open court, with a microphone. And the judge didn't stop him. Everett Boudreau had been driving the same garbage truck route through Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue for 11 years. Same road, same hours, same coffee from the Tim Hortons on the corner of Morgan and St. Charles. He knew which houses put their bins out early, which ones forgot until Tuesday morning, which elderly lady on Rue des Arabes left cookies on top of her recycling box at Christmas. He wasn't a complicated man. He was 34 years old, built like someone who'd grown up hauling firewood. Because he had, and he spoke the way most Quebecers do when they're tired, quietly, with their hands. His co-worker Patrice used to say Everett was the kind of man who'd stop his truck in the middle of a route to help a stranger cross ice, which wasn't a metaphor. He'd actually done it 3 times. The 4th time changed his life. It was a February morning, the kind that makes you question every decision you've ever made about where to live. -22 with wind chill. The sky was the gray-white of old porcelain, and the roads hadn't been salted yet when Everett pulled his truck onto Chemin du Bord, du Lac, just before 6 in the morning. Patrice was on the radio complaining about his knee. Everett was half listening, half watching the road, when the headlights caught something at the edge of the ditch near the lakefront. A woman, sitting in the snow. She wasn't lying down. She wasn't unconscious. She was just sitting there, in a housecoat and slip-on shoes, looking out at the frozen lake like she was waiting for something she couldn't quite name. Everett pulled the truck to the shoulder. Patrice stopped talking. "You see that?" "Yeah," Everett said. He was already out of the cab. The cold hit him like a door slammed in his face. He crossed the road fast, boots crunching on packed snow, and crouched down in front of her. She was somewhere in her 80s, he guessed. White hair loose around her face. Her lips were starting to go the color of a bruise. "Ma'am." He took off his gloves and put them in his pockets and touched her arm gently. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She looked at him. Her eyes were blue and present and frightened, not confused, not absent, frightened, like she knew exactly where she was and couldn't explain how she'd gotten there. "I was looking for Andre," she said. Her voice was small and steady. "He was just here." "Okay," Everett said. "Let's get you warm first. Then we'll find Andre." He didn't know who Andre was. He still doesn't, to this day, but it was the right thing to say. He helped her up. She weighed almost nothing, and walked her to the passenger side of the truck. Patrice had climbed down and was standing on the road looking at the woman with the expression of someone who didn't know what to do with his hands. "Call it in," Everett said. "Right, yeah." Patrice reached for his phone. Everett got the woman into the cab. She sat with her frozen hands in her lap, and he turned the heat up as high as it would go and gave her his jacket. She held it to her chest without putting it on, like a child holding a blanket. "What's your name?" he asked. "Georgette," she said. "Georgette Arnoux. I'm Everett. You're safe now, Georgette." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if she'd made a decision about him. "You have kind eyes," she said. "Like my husband." The ambulance came in 12 minutes. A police cruiser came with it. Everett stood in the cold while the paramedics worked, answering the officer's questions in a straightforward way. He'd found her. He'd moved her to the vehicle. He'd called it in. He had nothing to hide, so it didn't occur to him to be careful. The officer wrote things down and thanked him, and that was that, or so he thought. Georgette Arnoux was admitted to the hospital with mild hypothermia and a bladder infection that had, according to the ER doctor, likely been contributing to her disorientation for several days. She had early-stage dementia, documented and managed by her family physician. She had a nephew. His name was Bruno Arnoux, and he lived 40 minutes away in Dollard-des-Ormeaux, and he drove to the hospital that morning in a silver Audi, with a parking permit from a golf club on the dashboard. He arrived to find his aunt sitting up in bed, warm, eating soup, telling a nurse about a man named Andre. Bruno spoke with the attending physician. He asked detailed questions about his aunt's mental capacity, her ability to manage her affairs, whether her accounts had been accessed recently. The physician, who had been a physician for 30 years, answered carefully. Bruno drove home. 11 days later, Everett received a call from the Sûreté du Québec. They had questions about the morning of February 14th. The first interview was in a beige room in a building that smelled of old coffee and floor wax. 2 investigators. One did most of the talking. The other wrote things down. They asked about Everett's relationship with Georgette Arnoux. "I didn't have one," he said. "I'd never met her before." They asked why he'd moved her before the ambulance arrived. Because she was in -22, he said. Because she was wearing house shoes. They asked about the jacket. I gave her my jacket. You removed it before the ambulance arrived? No. She had it when they got there. You can ask Patrice. You can ask the paramedics. They asked if he'd taken anything from her person, her pockets, her hands. Everett looked at them for a long moment. No, are you sure? I'm sure. They thanked him and said they might be in touch. He drove home, made pasta, watched the news. Couldn't tell you what was on it. The charges came 3 weeks later. Theft under $5,000. And a second charge that hit him like cold water. Exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He sat in his kitchen with the papers in front of him and read them twice. Then he called his sister in Gatineau, who told him to get a lawyer. He told her he didn't have money for a lawyer. She said she'd figure something out. She didn't call back for 2 days. He went to work. What else was he going to do? Patrice found out somehow these things get around and pulled him aside in the depot one morning, face tight. What is this? I don't know yet, Everett said. You saved that woman, I know. Then what? I said, I don't know, Patrice. The thing about being a garbage man, and Everett knew this the way you know something you've never said out loud. People looked through you, not at you, not past you, through you the way you look through glass. You were there and not there at once. You moved through their mornings like weather. You took away the things they didn't want to think about, and you disappeared before they had their second coffee. He'd made peace with that. It didn't make him angry anymore. It just was. But standing in front of a bale, hearing in a wrinkled button-down he'd bought at a Freep Pricks in 2019, no lawyer beside him, facing a prosecutor who held his papers with 2 fingers like he'd rather not touch them, that was something different. That was being not just invisible but actively defined. Narrated. Given a story he hadn't written. The prosecutor's name was Moreau. He was precise and confident, and had the bearing of a man who'd never been cold in February a day in his life. The accused, Moreau said, in the particular tone of someone making an argument they consider already won, is an individual with no post-secondary education, a history of labor violations. He paused there, and Everett thought about the one workplace incident report from 2018 when a wheel had gone, and he'd filed it late, and no evident connection to the victim. He approached a vulnerable elderly woman, removed her from public access, and during that time her watch, an Arnoux family heirloom, gold, valued at approximately $400. Went missing. She wasn't wearing a watch, Everett said. The judge looked at him. I apologize, Everett said. I'll wait, Moreau continued. The watch had last been seen the morning in question, according to her nephew. There were no other persons of contact. The truck driver had acted alone, without authorization, without calling emergency services first. Though he claims otherwise, Moreau said, with a small tilt of his head that made the claim sound fragile. Everett thought about Patrice on the phone before he'd even gotten back to the cab. He thought about the dispatch record, the timestamp, the ambulance crew. He didn't say anything. The bail conditions were light. He wasn't considered a flight risk. He had a fixed address, 11 years in the same job, but the charge stood. The trial date was set for May. He walked out of the courthouse into the gray March air and stood on the steps for a moment. A woman nearby was smoking and not looking at him. A pigeon landed on the railing and left. He went home. He made pasta again. He didn't taste it. The weeks between the hearing and the trial had a texture to them that Everett remembered afterwards as something like waiting for a bus in winter. Time passed. Cold passed through you. There was nothing to do but stand there. His supervisor at the depot, a man named Hebert, pulled him into the office 2 weeks before the trial and explained, with the expression of someone doing something distasteful, that Everett would need to take a leave of absence pending the outcome, paid, but still. I understand, Everett said. It's policy, Hebert said. I understand. Everett had driven that route for 11 years. He knew every pothole, every dog that barked from the yard on Rue St. Thomas, every family that had moved in or moved out or added a baby to the recycling output. Leaving it, even temporarily, felt like something being amputated quietly. He called his sister again. She said she'd found someone. A legal aid clinic. A woman named, I'll go, Everett said. The woman at the legal aid clinic was young and thin and had the focused, slightly exhausted look of someone who worked 80 hours a week because she believed in what she was doing. Her name was Isabel. No, wait. Isabel was in the other file. Her name was Corinne. She listened to Everett's account from beginning to end without interrupting, made notes in the margins of a yellow legal pad, and then asked him 2 questions. Did Patrice's call get logged by dispatch? Yes. And the paramedics, did they document the jacket? I believe so. She had it when they loaded her. Corinne looked at her notes. Okay. What's your relationship with your daughters like? Everett looked at her. You have 3 daughters, adopted. It's in the background check. Yes. Do they know about the charges? He was quiet for a moment. They know, are they? They're coming, he said. That's not something I asked for, but they're coming. Corinne nodded and wrote something down. Okay, she said again. The thing about Everett's daughters was this. He'd adopted them the same year his wife had gotten sick, not as a distraction from grief, but as a continuation of something she'd wanted. Marie-Claire had wanted children their whole marriage, and it had never happened the natural way, and when she got the diagnosis at 41, she'd looked at him across the kitchen table and said very calmly, I still want to do this. So they had. Isabeau had been 12 when they brought her home. She was 26 now, and worked as a forensic social worker in Montreal, the kind of job that required you to know exactly where the lines were between systems and the people those systems were meant to protect. Priya, not Priya from the other file, a different Priya, and yes, the name was allowed. Priya had been 9. She was 23 now and was finishing her 2nd year of law school at McGill. She had her mother's way of going very still when she was angry. And then there was Lucy. Lucy had been 7 and had arrived with 1 shoe and an asthma inhaler and the most unflappable expression Everett had ever seen on a child. She was 21 now and had just been accepted into the nursing program at Université de Montréal. None of them had their father's last name. They'd kept their own. They called him Papa anyway. The morning of the trial, Everett arrived at the courthouse at 8:15. Corinne was already there, in a blazer that looked freshly pressed, reviewing something on her phone. She looked up when she saw him. Eat? She asked. A bit, okay. She put her phone away. Patrice is here. The dispatch log is certified. The paramedic report documents the jacket and places your handoff to emergency services at 6:07 a.m. The watch. She paused. I requested Georgette's hospital intake photographs. No watch. I also subpoenaed the nephew's insurance claim. Everett looked at her. The nephew filed an insurance claim, yes, for a gold watch. Filed 12 days before the charges against you were laid. The air in the corridor changed slightly. Or maybe that was just him. Will the judge see that? The judge will see everything, Corinne said. Moreau opened as he'd opened at the hearing. Confident, measured, with that precise 2-fingered way of holding documents. He walked the court through the timeline. He presented the nephew's testimony. Bruno Arnoux appeared in a dark suit, spoke carefully, made firm and limited eye contact with the jury. He described his aunt as a vulnerable woman, her assets carefully managed, her trust easily exploited. When Moreau got to Everett's character, he returned to the theme he'd established at the hearing. This is a man, he said, who by his own account stopped his truck, approached an isolated woman before calling any authority, moved her without consent, and was alone with her for approximately 11 minutes before any other party arrived on scene. 11 minutes. He let that sit. 11 minutes is a long time, he said, with a confused elderly woman who cannot accurately account for what happened. She wasn't confused, said a voice from the back of the room. The judge looked up. The doors at the back of the courtroom were open. 3 women stood in the aisle. Isabeau walked in first, the way she always did things, steadily, without announcement, with a lanyard around her neck that identified her as a child protection case officer. Behind her was Priya, in a blazer that matched Corinne's almost exactly, carrying a leather folder and walking with the quiet authority of someone who'd been arguing cases in moot court for 2 years and was not even slightly afraid of a real one. And behind them was Lucy, in her nursing program scrubs. She'd come straight from a clinical placement, with a printed report in her hands and that same unflappable expression she'd had at 7 years old. Moreau turned around. The courtroom did that thing courtrooms do when something unexpected happens, a kind of collective held breath, a slight forward lean. The judge looked at the 3 women, then at Everett, then at Corinne. Who are these individuals? The judge said. Corinne stood. These are Isabeau Cote, Prianaire, and Lucy Marchand. They are the adopted daughters of the accused. They have been subpoenaed as character witnesses, Your Honor. Moreau made a sound. The character of the accused is not. It was made relevant. Corinne said evenly. By the prosecution's extensive characterization of his character, I'm simply responding in kind. The judge considered this. Then, proceed. Isabeau testified first. She spoke about her father, with the precision of someone who worked in a profession where imprecision destroyed families. She described the household she'd come into at 12. A small house in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue. A woman named Marie Claire who made rice pudding on Sundays, a man who drove a garbage truck and came home smelling of diesel and left his boots on the step and always knocked the snow off them first. She described watching her father, over the years, stop to help people. Not because he was performing goodness, because it was reflexive in him, the way ducking is reflexive when something comes at your head. She described the first winter when a man had been stuck in the ditch near their house. Everett had left dinner on the table, getting cold to push the man's car out. He'd come back with snow on his shoulders and said nothing about it. He never said anything about it. That was the thing. He didn't have a story about himself. He just did things. Then Priya walked to the stand with her folder and spoke about legal standards of evidence, about the difference between proximity to a crime and commission of a crime, about what 12 minutes with a frightened elderly woman looks like when that man is the one who found her and is keeping her warm. She cited 2 cases. Her voice didn't shake once. Moreau objected twice. The judge sustained neither. Then Lucy stood up, still in her scrubs, and said simply, I read the intake report from the hospital. She had no watch on when she was admitted. There are photographs. I have them. She set the papers on the table in front of Corinne. Corinne stood. Your Honor, I'd like to enter these into evidence. The judge looked at the photographs, then at Bruno Arnoux in the dark suit. Bruno Arnoux' expression, which had been carefully composed all morning, did something complicated. What happened next unfolded the way things unfold when an argument collapses under its own weight, slowly, then suddenly. The insurance claim was entered. The date was confirmed, filed before the police report. The hospital intake photos were confirmed, no watch. Patrice was called to the stand and gave his account in the flat, direct way of someone who has nothing to embellish. The dispatch timestamp was read into the record. Moreau did not laugh. He was not the type. But there was a moment, Everett saw it, when something in the prosecutor's posture shifted, a small rearrangement. The 2-fingered grip on his papers went to a full grip, the kind that wrinkles pages. The judge recessed for 40 minutes. When she came back, she didn't look at Moreau. The charges against Everett Boudreau, she said, are dismissed. The evidence does not support prosecution, and it is the view of this court that the complainant's own documentation places significant doubt on the integrity of the original complaint. The matter is referred to the Crown for review of the complainant's conduct. She looked up. Mr. Boudreau, you're free to go. Everett sat very still for a moment. Corinne put her hand briefly on his arm. He stood up. From the back of the room, Lucy started forward, and Isabeau was right behind her, and somewhere in there Priya was already pulling out her phone. To call who? Everett didn't know. A professor, maybe. Someone she wanted to tell. And they reached him in the aisle, and Lucy wrapped her arms around him. In that way she had since she was 7. Completely, with her whole self. And he stood there in the middle of the courtroom with his eyes closed. He didn't cry until they got to the parking lot. Georgette Arnoux was moved to a care facility in Beaconsfield 2 months later. Before she went, she was visited by a social worker, a different one, not Isabeau, and during that visit she produced, from a drawer in her nightstand, a gold watch with a cracked crystal face. She had no memory of when she'd put it there. She hadn't been wearing it that morning because the clasp was broken. Bruno Arnoux' insurance claim was denied. He was subsequently investigated by the Autorité des Marchés Financiers for an unrelated matter involving his aunt's investment accounts. Everett went back to work the 2nd week of June. Hebert was waiting with a cup of Tim Hortons when he arrived. I know, Hebert said, holding it out. Policy, Everett said. He took the coffee. I understand. His route was the same. The road, the hours, the lady on Rue des Érables. She'd left granola bars this year instead of cookies. He took one and left the wrapper neatly beside the bin. Some mornings you drive that route, and the sun is coming up over the river, and the road is quiet, and the cab is warm, and you've got your coffee, and there's nothing complicated about any of it. You are exactly where you are. The city is sleeping. You are the first person to move through it. Everett liked those mornings. He'd always liked those mornings. He liked them more now. There is a kind of person this world produces regularly and does not celebrate enough, the one who stops, who sees something wrong at the edge of the road and doesn't calculate the inconvenience first, doesn't wonder what it will cost, doesn't drive past telling themselves someone else will handle it. They just stop, the sanitation worker, the night security guard, the woman who drives the school bus, the man who fixes your furnace at 2 in the morning. They are not in headlines. They don't have origin stories. They just stop. If someone like that once stopped for you, you know their name. Drop it in the comments.